respect or allow a group of people to act out or practice their religion. This doesn't mean you have to believe in their practices, but have respect for their culture. My subtopic was history of religious tolerance. Throughout history, there have been many cases of religious intolerance. During the 1900s and World War II, millions of Jewish people were imprisoned in concentration camps by the Nazi army. Around 6 million died. In 35 AD, a large fire occurred in Rome that was unjustly blamed on the Christians there, starting a persecution that lasted until around 307 AD. Many Islamic leaders have been killed, such as Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman. From the 1200s to the 1700s, India was controlled by Muslims. They tried to prevent the Hindu from practicing their faith and destroyed many Hindu temples.
Hi, my name is Hunter Urban, and my subtopic is religious intolerance. Religious intolerance is intolerance against another religion's beliefs or practices. Religious intolerance has been around for as long as religion. With many different reasons, people may be intolerant of a religion. Some examples of religious intolerance include discriminating a religion, destroying religious buildings, and preventing people from practicing their faith.
Hi, I'm David Solonis, and my subtopic was religious tolerance, or religious stereotypes. Religious stereotypes are specific traits assigned to a certain group of people. An example would be the Islamic religion. People would immediately think the violence associated with Muslims in the Middle East. This is a very common situation that many can see, specifically because you could physically tell when someone is part of the Islamic religion. This stereotype is one of the most dangerous stereotypes as people gain false knowledge, most especially from media. We are shown images of Muslims so often in a negative sense that we have now only put up violent associations to this religious group. Many negative stereotypes come from various extreme groups that claim to be part of a specific religious group. There are many political, economic, and social factors that play into these extremes. However, the stereotypes that appear on all Muslims and those from the Middle East is much more extreme than the stereotypes that we see on other religions.
Hi, I'm Richard Hicks, and my subtopic is religious leaders and deities. Religious leaders have a large part in why people have hope and find light through their religions. Some die for their faith and are remembered as greats and called martyrs. They use religion to provide help and guidance for themselves and others. Religious leaders can come from many different religions. Some Christian deities were Jesus and the apostles. Jesus created most of the principles of Christianity, while the apostles created the book of Acts and the Bible and helped grow and expand the teachings. Buddha is the founder of Buddhism. He was born a prince and later started his spiritual journey as an adult. Afterwards, he spread what he found in his journeys and created Buddhism. Documentary. For our documentary, we asked a few religious leaders some questions on how to describe their religion. We hope that if you learn a bit about their religion, you will see that it's not that different from yours and may learn to tolerate it more.
practices that you engage in order to be accepted by God. And so when I think about most faiths, whether it's Buddhism or what I understand of the Muslim faith, and even I would say sometimes within the Christian movement, it is if you do X, Y, Z, and practice them faithfully, you'll get to heaven or you'll be saved. So Christianity is a part of this. They're called a religion, but I think what truly makes Christianity unique, apart from every other religion, is not the rules, it's the event of Jesus. Jesus, the Son of God, coming to earth. Jesus being crucified on a cross. And all of the evidence around Jesus coming back from the dead. And so, if Christianity is not based on things that you do in order to be saved by God, but it is really based on what Jesus accomplished for us, then it's like the religious activity goes away and it becomes a religion of faith in what Jesus has already accomplished. And so for me, like, I wasn't in the church when I was in college. I thought I could control my own life, and religions were all the same, and you just had to apply yourself, and I didn't want to go into restricting religion. But then when I started looking at the evidence around Jesus, and the fact that Jesus came back from the dead, that he predicted his own death, burial, and resurrection, here's what that means. That means that Jesus is either a liar, he's a lunatic, or he's actually like the Lord that he says he is. And so if he's a liar, then there's a lot of people who are following him stupidly. You know what I mean? If he's a lunatic, you're following a crazy man. But there's even evidence within the Roman Empire that this movement of Christians, these eyewitnesses that saw Jesus come back from the dead, that there's something about him that makes him, I believe, unique and special. And so really what we try to do is create an environment where I don't care what you believe, but I'm going to talk about Jesus, and I want to talk about him in ways that are practical, and we're going to talk about the evidence that surrounds his resurrection.
As you can see, Pastor Ben described the uniqueness of Christianity as the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We then asked Orthodox priests the same question.
Okay, so Orthodox Christianity is a sibling of Roman Catholicism, right? So we were one church for 1,000 years. We've been two different churches for another 1,000 years. So we're very similar to Roman Catholics. We're Christian, old Christian, 2,000 years of history, uninterrupted history of Christianity. So we're different from non-Christians, obviously. The greatest difference that has to be articulated is probably between us and Catholics. What do we have that Catholics don't have, or the other way around? We don't have a pope, first of all. So in Orthodoxy, the power, the decision power is not accumulated in the hands of one person. Our church is built somewhat differently. Our services are different these days because we've gone different ways for 1,000 years. Right? Orthodox services haven't changed much in 1,000 years. Catholic services have changed a lot. Theology, we're not that different. We have the saints, we have Mass. This is Mass. We call it liturgy, what you've assisted at today. So we have the Mass, we have the daily office, we have all the other services Catholics have. But we don't have a pope because we conceive the church somewhat differently. We have married priests. That's another difference over which we parted ways, actually. I think those are probably the differences that will stand out the most immediately to some of the steps within the Orthodox Church. We don't commemorate a particular pope, right? You're not going to hear the name of a person that is the head of the whole church.
The priest said a list of things differentiating Catholicism versus Eastern Orthodox Christianity.
Finally, we asked the Imam the same question.
Well, Islam, we call it. It's called in the Arabic language. It's called Deen al-Fitra, and Deen al-Fitra means that it is the way patterned after nature. So we say religion for the sake of communication. but really Islam, and it's properly called al-Islam. We don't see it as religion. It has religious aspects to it and rituals that are associated with it, but in and of itself, it's inclusive of the entire spectrum of human life. It's not limited to just spiritual pursuits. It's also worldly. God tells us in the Quran to seek the life after this, the next life, but don't neglect your share of this one. And so it has it takes life and puts it in a practical way. And so when we say religion, we say that simply to communicate with people, because most people think that it's just religion. But Islam is not just a set of rituals. It is a very comprehensive and total way of living life. If it's practiced like it's supposed to be practiced, then it closes the door to extremism and dogma, if you know what dogma is. It closes the door to that. Racism and prejudice and ego. But human beings are human beings. So, it's a part of our makeup to sometimes become, arrogant and to become haughty or to become overbearing, to see ourselves in the delusion of as if though we have some power, which we don't. We really just have time, by the grace of God, to put ourselves in the proper context that God intended for us to be in when He created the human being.
So even he said the law, it will eventually change. And it did change. The law changed, right? And people's customs will change. But the ultimate enemy is the evil in the human heart, right? So today we have much better laws than we had 50 years ago. But we look around and there's still a lot of evil in our hearts. And it comes, and now it surfaces, right? All that tolerance did, and all this language of acceptance and tolerance, and all it did is actually to push it deeper, where in some people actually it festered for decades, and now it explodes, right? Hatred and all of that is still there. It's just hiding under the customs of being nice, of being acceptable, of not being offensive, right? It hid, but the evil of the human heart, that's the ultimate enemy, as Martin Luther King put it. And we have to watch out for that evil, which can fester in every single one of our hearts. And that's what we need to get rid of. That's the final solution. As long as it's deep in here, it helps. It helps having tolerant laws, right? It helps having tolerant customs and habits and right, mores, right? Society conventions. But the evil of the human heart, that's the enemy.
Following afterwards is the imam.
Because we say that the nature of death, death is a test, and we're taught that every soul will taste it. Every soul will taste death, and taste is an indication from Scripture that death isn't permanent, and that death is also discretionary, and it has a dual discretionary purpose. And one is for the human being to live the life in the context that God created him to live in it, and the other is at the discretion of the user, and the user of death is really God. We can't, God is the one who uses it, and so we can't. A human being should never feel as if though we have the authority to take another life, even though we do. The issue or the situation that took place in New Zealand, it's really an assault on humanity itself, because we're all on this earth together, even if we don't look alike, even if we don't think alike, even if we're not alike, we're still have to share this planet together. And no matter what anyone else thinks or anyone else feels, there's nothing that any of us can do about that. And the more we try, the harder it will get. The issue there, the underlying issue about that is the issue of supremacy, racial superiority, which in the world right now we call that white supremacy, because many times it's because of this idea, this image of self that people have that gives them the notion or the delusion that their race is better than another race. And as long as people are being conditioned like that, we're going to have trouble. We're going to have these kind of troubles and these kind of issues taking place in the world. Because the main thing I think that people fear is they fear what they don't understand, and they fear what they don't know. And when people mix, we live in America. America is, they call it the melting pot. People come here, and in time they end up integrating. You find people from different ethnicities. Even though this country went through a terrible history of slavery and Jim Crowism, genocide from the natives that were here. America has a terrible history. But in this day and age, history like that couldn't even repeat itself. Even though there are those who try, but there's so much integration now. African Americans marrying white, Arabs and Indians, and just people. When you go to the college campuses, there's so much diversity on the college campus. They're going to have some racial issues in different areas, but there's still the issue of integration is becoming so profound that in time there's just not anything that anyone can do about it. There's nothing we can do about that. We can delay the inevitable, but we can't stop nature from taking its toll, for having its role in the grand scheme of things.
Overall, the point of this documentary and action project is to inform you about some religions in today's society. We hope that by learning about these religions, you will learn to be more tolerant to them.
Any questions? Come across our subtopics? Oh. So for the mosque, we asked Suleiman. Yeah, I believe so. And then for Cedar Creek, Mr. Bumpus recommended that for us, so we went there. And then the Eastern Orthodox Church, we just looked it up online. I learned that religious stereotypes can be found in a lot of situations, especially in higher stage, on the bigger stages, like politics and stuff like that. Kind of found it surprising actually that people, not immature, but people could do that sort of thing with their celebrity role or something like that.
I learned that the religions that we went to, that they're not that different from mine, and I got to learn more about them by going to their services.
Yeah, I'm probably the same with Richard. I learned that most of these religions, they're not that different from ours. There's a little different practices and stuff, but they mostly have the same morals. And
I learned that we should like not like fight about our religions and like be like one.